Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be getting started shortly, and when we do, there will be audio. Please copy. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me start that again. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kristen Jandoli with Generations Health. Thank you so much for joining us for our program today, Setting Limits in Dementia Caregiving, presented by Jennifer Fitzpatrick. We are so grateful to have Ingleside sponsoring today's program. And in just a moment, I'm going to invite them to join us. But first, there's a few things I want to go over with you. Everyone is muted to eliminate any background noise. However, this is an interactive program, so please feel free to ask questions, answer questions, or if you have any comments on the discussion that is taking place, please leave them in the chat. To do this, you can use the chat feature. As a reminder, to find the chat, you can scroll over the bottom of your screen, and there you'll see a banner that pops up. On the banner, there's a bubble that says chat. When you click on that, the chat feature will launch and will most likely show up on the right-hand side of your screen. When you use the chat, your questions, comments, and answers will only be seen by our sponsor, our presenter, Jennifer, and myself. This is simply for privacy reasons. Again, we encourage your participation, so please do use the chat feature. Jennifer is great about keeping an eye on the chat to answer your questions. As I mentioned, we are so grateful to have sponsors for today's program. At this time, to share a little information with you, I'd like to invite Kristen Shanks from Ingleside to join me.
So good morning, or excuse me, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kristen Shanks, and I am the Director of Sales for Ingleside. We are a premier senior living organization, and we have 3 life plan communities in the DMV. In front of you is information on each community. We have Ingleside at Rock Creek in Washington, D.C., Westminster at Lake Ridge in Lake Ridge, Virginia, and Ingleside at King Farm, located in Rockville, Maryland. All 3 of our communities are life plan communities, which means they have all levels of care from independent living, assisted living, memory support assisted living, skilled nursing, and rehab, and we are all CARF accredited communities. In regards to our community in Rockville and in Washington, D.C., Ingleside at King Farm and Ingleside at Rock Creek, we also have a special program called Memory Support Assisted Living. This is a residential program for our residents who are diagnosed with a neurocognitive impairment. Our residents receive a person-centered approach with individualized therapeutic programming, and our programming is created to honor each resident's individual choices and help them fulfill the life that they would like to lead. I thought it was important to let the audience today know that we do have a respite program within our assisted living, and most importantly, our memory support assisted living. I know that there are probably a few people on this call right now who are a caregiver to someone who has been diagnosed with a neurocognitive impairment, and self-care is very important to you. Obviously, caring for a loved one is very gratifying, but your self-care is just as important. So a respite is a wonderful idea for someone who might need some time to either focus on themselves or another family member and give your loved one the programming and the great care that they need during that time. So again, we have 3 communities: Ingleside at Rock Creek, Westminster at Lake Ridge, and Ingleside at King Farm. We welcome you to contact us with any information that you'd like. And again, I want to thank you for joining this presentation and look forward to speaking to you soon.
Great. Thank you so much, Kristen. We're about to get started, but first I would like to give you a little information about our presenter. Are you a stressed out caregiver that feels like caregiving has taken over your life? Do you have trouble accepting help from others? If so, you are in the right place. Our presenter this afternoon is the author of Cruising Through Caregiving, Reducing the Stress of Caring for Your Loved One, and the upcoming book, Reimagining Customer Service in Healthcare. A former psychotherapist, Jennifer has also been featured in national media such as the Washington Post, The Wall Street Journal, Chicago Tribune, Forbes, Fast Company, and many more. When she's not speaking and writing, she can be found serving as a below-average first mate on her boat. Please join me in welcoming, from Kent Island, Maryland, Jennifer L. Fitzpatrick.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. We're going to go through a lot of information today, but perhaps most importantly, we're going to do some exercises to find out if you are in martyr syndrome, and if you are, what to do about it. So I want to invite you, while I'm speaking, to grab yourself a pen and paper, or if you are on a computer joining us, if you would open up a Word document. And if you're on the phone, or maybe if you're driving, if you called in on your phone, we can definitely send you, if you go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com, we can actually send you a hard copy of this exercise that we're going to do during the program. But this is going to be an hour all about you, to determine what you can do to reduce your stress if you put your mind to it. So the first question I want to ask you, and I want people to feel free to write in the questions, I'm sorry, the chat section, feel free to write in. Do you know a totally selfless caregiver? And it could be you, or it could be somebody else. It could be a friend, a family member, somebody else that's helping out with your loved one. I'm getting no's so far. Anybody know a totally selfless caregiver, family caregiver? So for today, so if you don't, for those who are writing, okay, so Karen's saying, what does that look like? Well, we're going to go and get really deep into that. But a totally selfless caregiver really puts caregiving above everything else. Everything else. They don't really make much time, energy for anything but caregiving. And people might say, she selflessly cares for her mom, or she selflessly cares for her husband. And a lot of times people assume and think that that's a compliment, that that's how it should be. That's the way it should be. But I'm guessing from the people who said, no, they don't know a totally selfless caregiver, you probably can guess that I'm going to say that it's not really a compliment. People might think that that's a compliment, but I don't think that there really should be any selfless caregivers, because we as human beings need to make caregiving, if we have somebody that we love that needs our help, we need to make it part of our life. We don't want to make it our whole life. And so if you or someone you know is making caregiving your whole life, you really want to examine what you want to do differently. Now, some people will hold up their hands if they feel like they fall into this completely selfless caregiver category. They might hold up their hand and say, I think I should be a selfless caregiver. This is my parent. This is my spouse. This is my aunt. This is somebody I love. But the truth is, if you are truly a totally selfless caregiver, long term, and I'm talking months, years, you are not able to provide the best care for your loved one. You might feel like you are, since you're devoting all your time and energy, but your loved one is not getting the best of you. And perhaps even more importantly, there is data to support the concept that you are having challenges. Lots and lots of data says that the more that you don't accept help, that you are completely selfless, you will have physical problems. You will have psychological problems. You will have, even yourself, some cognitive problems. Now, I want to give you an example of once upon a time when I was a totally selfless caregiver. My grandmother was sick when she was in her 60s, and she had an issue. She had to have a surgery. And for 4 weeks, my aunts and I took care of her. And so I would say that I was a pretty selfless caregiver during that time. And my aunts were also. And all the 4 of us did, we worked at our jobs. We went to work, and then we gave care to my grandmother. We took shifts over a month's period of time. But at the end of those 4 weeks, we went back to life as usual because my grandmother was healed. And so for a short period of time, you might have been in a situation like that with somebody you love. Maybe they had a surgery, maybe they had a fall or an accident. And you had to put your life on hold for a week or a few days or a month or maybe even a couple of months. And maybe you just did caregiving, or maybe you balanced a job in caregiving, or maybe really you couldn't really work, but you were taking care of your kids in caregiving for your loved one. But what we know is if we do that long term, if we do that 6, 8, 12, 18 months, a year, 10 years, and with dementia caregiving, it very well can be 10 years. It can be 5 years. It can be 10 years. And sometimes it can even be 15 years. This is very, very bad for not just our loved one, because they're not getting the very best of us, but it's also very bad for us because we are suffering. We are suffering psychologically, cognitively, and physically. Doing this on an ongoing basis is not good for us. So, what exactly is martyr syndrome? Martyr syndrome, again, is something that it's almost like you know it when you see it. That somebody is truly doesn't have a life outside of caregiving. And so why is this a problem? Again, we talked about the cognitive, physical, and psychological impact on you, and also the fact that your loved one doesn't get the best of you. But in addition, martyr syndrome can actually kill you. Think about it. Let's say that you're not taking care of your physical health, your mental health, your socialization. You're not doing anything for yourself to enrich your life. What happens if, heaven forbid, you have a medical emergency? What if you die before your loved one? What is the plan? And so I want everybody today to, whether you're going to take the quiz, we're going to give a quiz to find out if you're in martyr syndrome. If you are the family caregiver who is involved with caring for a loved one with dementia today, or maybe you happen to be on this program, but your loved one doesn't have dementia, maybe they have something else going on, you're going to take the quiz, but also maybe you are going to take that quiz on behalf of somebody you love. So when I was a psychotherapist, which I did for many years, did counseling, I worked with a family where there was a wife that strongly felt that her husband was in martyr syndrome. They were taking care of her husband's dad. They had set up a room in their home for her husband's dad who had Alzheimer's disease. And really, her husband did not want any help in the home, didn't want any home care. He didn't really want a lot of friends and family and neighbors participating and helping. He really only wanted it to be himself and his wife and their daughter to be the ones to help dad. And this really created a situation where that whole family unit, the daughter and the wife, became very resentful of her husband and the daughter's father. They also became really resentful of the grandfather, the father-in-law, because they felt so much pressure that they had to do everything in order to keep dad safe, keep dad healthy. Never mind the idea about assisted living or nursing home. That was never going to be discussed. But the idea of even bringing some home care in, maybe looking at respite, like Kristen Shanks talked about before she came off of the program, maybe looking at getting some neighbors and friends to pitch in, bring meals, hang out with your loved one while you go get your hair cut or something like that. When somebody is really vehemently opposed to that, it's very likely that he or she is in martyr syndrome. And so we are going to do a little quiz, and some signs of martyr syndrome, as we talked about, can be physical. Maybe you are having a lot more acid reflux than you ever had. Maybe it's been under control for a long time. Maybe you're having muscle aches. Emotional, maybe you're really nervous and on edge a lot more than you have been in a long time, and you just can't figure out why. Psychological, maybe you've had depressive symptoms in the past and they're back and you don't really know what to do about them. Spiritual, maybe one of the spiritual pieces of this could potentially be that you love to go to temple or synagogue or church or what have you, and you just stop going. Or maybe you're somebody that likes to meditate or just pray at home and you're not able to do that anymore. You've stopped accepting social engagements that you want to go to. Now, certainly there are social obligations that you might be saying no to that you're like, I really don't want to go. I don't care if I go. That's different. But what about social obligations where you'd really like to go, but you don't feel like you can? Relational. The example I just gave about the couple and their daughter who were taking care of dad at home. That marriage was really suffering because dad came before everybody else in that family. And it went on for many years. It wasn't a short-term situation like I shared about my grandmother. Financial, maybe you're putting money that you can't afford toward caring for your loved one. So these are just some of the signs of martyr syndrome that can occur. So what's the antidote? One of the best things that we can do is set a boundary. Now, with that psychotherapy client that I talked about, the wife whose husband was insisting that everything be done at home, that dad lived with them. One of the conversations, and it took several sessions for me to get to this point with this individual. And again, please know that I'm changing all identifying characteristics. Whenever I share a psychotherapy or coaching situation, it's a composite character. But when I spoke with this individual about how she could improve the quality of her life, I talked to her about boundaries. What kind of boundaries did she want to put up? And there are a lot of different options when we start looking at boundaries. For one, a family member, a spouse might say, listen, I can't have your dad live here unless we have some outside help. Or I'm not comfortable having your dad live here for more than a year. I think we need to make plans after that. Now, some of you might be thinking, yeah, right, it's easier said than done. I know it's not easy, but I also know that you have to pick what's going to be difficult. So let's think about this for a minute. Maybe you're in a situation where you are, and we're going to do the exercise in a few moments, you find that you are in martyr syndrome and you do need to put up some boundaries. And you say, well, if I have that conversation with my husband, he's going to be really angry with me. How many people are thinking that? Well, I don't want to risk that. So you can either have all this tension in your relationship with your spouse, be resenting his dad, be resenting him, feeling like you don't have the energy for anything else. So you can either do that, or you can set the boundary and let your spouse know what you can and can't do anymore, what you are willing and are not willing to do. When we were taking care of my grandmother when she was much older, she had a chronic illness. She had congestive heart failure many years later, 20 years after that injury that I talked to you about. And my dad actually put up the first boundary. All of us were taking turns sleeping at her house. And my dad was the first one to say, I can't sleep there anymore. I'm just not getting a good sleep. It's really impacting the physical. And when he said a boundary, everybody else in our family started looking at, okay, where's my line? Where's my line? And if we're going to be a healthy caregiver, we ourselves are going to be cognitively, psychologically, physically healthy, we all have to have our line. What is our line? What are things that we're willing to do? And what are things that we're not willing to do? And the example I shared about my grandmother and my aunts, that we took a month and we took care of her every minute of the day for 24 hours for a whole month. I will tell you that we didn't really have too many boundaries because we knew it was short term. And so if it's a short-term situation, okay, I'll help in the bathroom, I'll administer medicine, I'll cook food. I'm not the greatest cook, but I'm like, all right, I'll do it for my shift for the 4 weeks. But those, and I really didn't even say, well, you know what, I need X amount of time to hang out with my friends. No, during that month period, I was a girl in her 20s. I didn't hang out with my friends. I went to work and took care of my grandmother. But if that had lasted longer, that had been a 6-month, year, 2 years, 5 years, I'm sure that all of us would have to say, here's our boundary, here's our line, here's what we can do and what we can't do. So I want to invite you, if you've set a boundary on what you will or won't do for your loved one as a family caregiver, please feel free to write in a word or a phrase, like tell us about the boundary that you set. And especially since there are people on here who said that they don't know of any selfless caregivers, I'm hoping that you have some boundaries that you would like to share. Now, so I'm going to leave that open while we're going to move on. But if you haven't set any boundaries yet, and you find after today that you are in martyr syndrome, this is going to be the first thing that you're going to need to do in order to protect your physical, cognitive, and mental health. Because I promise you, if you don't set some boundaries, martyr syndrome has the potential to kill you. And also, your loved one is probably not quite getting the good care that they deserve. So how many people feel like either you or another member of your caregiving crew are in martyr syndrome? Give me a Y or an N, yes or no. Y or N in the chat section. And when I say your caregiving crew, it might be like the example I gave with my grandma, my 3 aunts and I, the 4 of us, we were her caregiving crew. The example of the family that I shared a little while ago about the wife, the husband, and the daughter, they were the caregiving crew. So I'm actually, wow, I'm hearing a lot of no's, which is wonderful. This is great. So I'm curious why, actually, I really am curious, why are folks on this program? Nobody feels like they're identifying about being in martyr syndrome. And maybe once we do the exercise, you'll feel differently, but I'm curious what attracted you to come to this event. Feel free to write any comments, any questions, because I can course correct. I can change a little bit of what we're going to do today. And we can, but I really would appreciate if somebody would write into the chat section. Okay, so Lillian's saying you still feel, oh, good. Lillian's saying you still feel overwhelmed with help. Okay, so there'll probably be some more boundaries you can set, Lillian. Laura's saying past behavior, it was martyr syndrome, not your current behavior. Karen says exactly. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so Nancy says, I've been a martyr in the past. Really great. Thank you so much for writing in. So what, if anybody, I want to know, is there anybody on here, please write in Y or yes if you feel like you or someone in your caregiving crew is in martyr syndrome, or you think that they might be. Because I really want to get a feel for this, because we can easily turn this into more of a Q&A. Okay, Karen's saying yes, she has somebody in her family. Okay, so let's, feel free, I'm going to go through the exercise. And remember, Kristen, if you could put this in the chat section, if you go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com, you can get all the worksheets from the book completely for free, and also a free chapter of the book. But what you can do is, if you would just, if you want to use this, like for example, Karen, if you want to give the worksheet to your brother, you can print it off and have him do it if you think he'd be open to it. But what we're going to do right now is I'm going to invite everybody to do the exercise. I'm going to zip through it a little faster than usual because I'm thinking that our time might be better served for me to do Q&A, answer questions. So we'll zip through the questions, and then and what this really is if it's you that you're concerned about, I want you to answer the questions based on yourself. And if it's somebody else in your family, friend, network that's helping with caregiving, I want you to think about how they would respond or how you'd respond for them. So remember, before I said bring out a piece of paper, a pen, or open a Word document. Column 1 is just for X's. Column 2, you're going to either put a letter or a symbol. So we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started. I'm going to zip through it a little quicker than usual, since it seems like this isn't the issue of many of you. And while we're going through this, feel free to write in your questions, because I want this hour to be valuable for you. I want you to get what you need out of this program today. So remember, on column 1 on the left, you're going to put an X if the slide applies to you. And then, for example, if stomach aches apply to you in the last 6 months, year, this has been going on, this has been a problem for you, I would put P on the right hand side, X on the left. Estrangements, tensions in family since caregiving began, R on the right, X on the left if it applies to you. Unplanned weight change. Sadly, for many of us, it's gain. For some of us, and some people can't afford to lose weight. Maybe it's that you've lost weight that you really weren't planning and you can't afford to. So P on the right, X on the left if this applies to you. More anxiety than usual. M on the right, X on the left. Increased use of alcohol or recreational drugs, M on the right, X on the left. Prescription drugs, increased use, M on the right, X on the left. Headaches, P on the right, X on the left. Sleep problems, P on the right, X on the left. Exhaustion and fatigue, P on the right, X on the left. More aches and pains, not just your usual ones, but more since you've begun caregiving. P on the right, X on the left. Flare up of any kind of chronic condition, like arthritis, for example. P on the right, X on the left. Arguing a lot with others in your personal and or professional life. P on the right, R on the right, X on the left. Reduce sexual activity. P on the right, X on the left. Spending most of your time alone or only with the older loved one and members of your caregiving crew. And so the example that I shared would be that husband and wife I was talking about. If they're only them, their daughter, and the parent, and that's kind of the only people that they're really spending most of their time with, R on the right, X on the left. Unable to relax, M on the right and X on the left. Feeling disconnected from spouse, partner, significant other, R on the right and X on the left. Onset and or exacerbation of depression, M on the right, X on the left. Resenting family and friends who aren't caregiving right now. So maybe that wife that I was talking to when I was doing counseling with her, she really resents her neighbor who she used to walk with or have coffee with because she doesn't have to worry about caregiving. R on the right, X on the left. Turning down social invitations you'd like to accept. Maybe there's a big fall cookout going on this weekend and you've said no because you need to take care of your loved one. Or maybe there's a reunion. Maybe you have a high school reunion that you'd actually like to go to and you're out of town and you're not going to go even though you'd like to. So I'd put F on the right and X on the left. Just in general, feeling out of balance. S on the right, X on the left. Upset with other members of the caregiving crew. Maybe you feel like they're not pulling their weight. Maybe you feel like they're being bossy. They're telling you what to do. I once worked with a family where one of the members of the caregiving crew would only fly in every few weeks and stay for 4 or 5 days and help. And that member of the caregiving crew was really critical of the person that was local. No, why don't you do it this way? Have you thought of that? And that created a lot of problems. Maybe you've got something like that going on, or another reason you're upset with one of the other members of the caregiving crew. So R on the right and X on the left, if that's you. Haven't gone on vacation during the time frame of caregiving. So in the last 6-12 months, now listen, I'm not saying that you need to go on a 3-week cruise to Europe, but if you haven't taken any vacation day, maybe gone to the beach, maybe done a day trip at minimum. If you haven't taken any sort of vacation in at least the last 6 to 12 months, no vacation because of caregiving, I want you to actually, Kristen, can you send me a note? This will be F. This is F. It would be F on the right and X on the left. Flare-ups of any mental health condition other than anxiety or depression. Maybe you have bipolar disorder, or maybe you have some other mental health condition, a hoarding problem. Maybe it could be an eating disorder and you're having flare-ups of that previously had been maybe under control to a certain extent. M on the right and X on the left. Eating poorly, whatever that means for you. So P on the right, X on the left. Not exercising, P on the right, X on the left. Haven't participated in a hobby you enjoy lately, whatever that means for you. Now, for me, my hobbies are really A lot of people maybe wouldn't even consider them real hobbies. I like to read. I read probably a couple books a week at least. Some people, they like going to Zumba. I hate stuff like that. So, or going to a book club, or maybe golf or tennis or pickleball, or something that you enjoy, that any kind of hobby, whether it's a solo hobby, maybe it's woodworking, whether it's painting, something that a hobby you enjoy that you haven't participated in lately. So put F on the right and X on the left. And again, something you enjoy. Missing your doctor's appointments, that you keep rescheduling your physical, you keep rescheduling your mammogram, you keep rescheduling, or you're not making the appointment at all, and you really know that you probably would be good for you to go for whatever it is. Maybe your cardiologist, maybe your primary care, maybe gynecological exam, maybe it might be, maybe you go to a physical therapist. I mean, whatever kind of appointment that you go to a physician or a doc for, P on the right and X on the left if you've been missing. A lot of times when someone's in martyr syndrome, they wouldn't dream of canceling a loved one, their mom, their husband's appointments, but they cancel their own, or they don't go to when they should go for themselves. Spending more money on your loved one that your spouse or partner is not comfortable with. And so in that family that I talked about earlier, with the husband and wife and the daughter taking care of dad, the husband wanted to spend a lot more money on creating a room in the house and a private bathroom for dad that the spouse wasn't particularly comfortable with. She felt that that money should have been put aside for college for their daughter. So a $ on the right and an X on the left. Missing appointments with your mental health provider or psychotherapist, M on the right and X on the left. Not taking your medicine as directed, P on the right, X on the left. Assuming you agreed to take the medicine. Maybe you left the workplace, even though you had financial repercussions because of yourself, your partner, your kids. I'm sorry, but there's repercussions to yourself, your partner, your kids. You stopped working because you thought you'd take care of your mom for 6 months, and now it's become 6 years, and you're worried. Am I going to have enough money to retire? Will I be able to have enough money for things that my children need, or things that my spouse and I need for our home? So a $ on the right and an X on the left. Maybe borrowing from retirement to take care of your older loved one. X on the left if this applies to you, and a $ on the right. Missing religious services, if that's something that you're into. If you really like to go to, say, church or mass or synagogue or temple or mosque, wherever it is that you worship, if that's something you enjoy and you like to do and you're missing it, S on the right and an X on the left. Spending more money than you can comfortably afford for items for your loved one, whatever that might be. Maybe you're buying their medicine. Maybe you are paying for certain services that they can't afford, that it's really squeezing your budget. $ on the right and an X on the left. If prayer, meditating, yoga, if these items are important to you and you're not making time for them, an S on the right and an X on the left. Feeling anger with God or a higher power, S on the right, X on the left. Not spending time in nature, if that's important to you. Now, I'll tell you, my version of nature might not be your version of nature. My version of nature is the beach. It's being out on the boat, on the water. Hiking, no, that would be something that I really don't care to do. A lot of times people, that's their version of nature, going camping, or I mean, some people might just be spending time in their garden. And then there's other people that they don't care about nature at all. So you don't worry about this one. But if this is you, put an S on the right and an X on the left. Okay, so what I'm going to see, does anybody need me to run through them one more time? I'm just going to go through them without speaking them out loud. I'm just going to in case anybody wants to see them one more time. Okay, so how many total items have resonated with you? Or if you're doing the exercise on behalf of somebody, like somebody I know shared a little while ago that they were thinking that their brother, I think it is Karen said, brother, you think your brother's in martyr syndrome. How many items resonated with you? How many total items resonated with you? Okay, 16. More than 5 checks, you're probably in martyr syndrome. So I'm having people who are writing in, it is coming up as more than 5. So feel free to write in to let me know. And so, yeah, it's interesting. I've got people writing in that said, oh, I don't know of any selfless caregivers. And turns out they have they're meeting some of the criteria for martyr syndrome. And remember, this exercise depends on the day that you're doing it. Day of the week, are you just having a particularly bad week, bad month? In a month, if you take it, the goal here is if you find that you are meeting the criteria for martyr syndrome, if you have more than 5 checks, what are you going to do differently after today's program? What small step are you going to take that you're going to change? Because if you want to get out of martyr syndrome, you're the only one that can make it happen. So the other question that I had is there one particular area or 2 particular areas that you're particularly suffering? So if you hit 4 for the $sign, you may want to look at, that's an area that I need to do some changing. I need to make some sort of change. And actually it would be 0 to 4 for fun, I believe, because yeah, so if you have more than 3 or 4 for fun, that's an area you want to work on more than, if you've got a good number of mental health, physical, relational, spiritual, there might be specific areas that you're not so much martyring yourself and other areas where you are. So feel free to write in if any of the areas that we discussed resonate for you. So now we're going to do a little informal poll. Just write it in the chat section. I want everybody, and some people already shared their scores, so I know that you're in A, that you're in martyr syndrome. But who's in martyr syndrome? A, is it you? B, is it one of your caregiving crewmates, a spouse, a sibling? C, nobody yet, but I think somebody else is close to being in martyr syndrome. Or D, would you say nobody? We're doing pretty well. Everybody throw in one of the letters so we can see where you are. Okay, so A and B. We got Karen saying you and somebody else. Nancy, great. Laura and Nancy say nope, nobody, but somebody on our crew is close. Me or somebody on the crew is close. So listen, if you are in the A category, you are the only one that can change things. And a lot of that has to do with setting boundaries. If it's a B situation, that you think it's somebody like your brother or somebody else that is in the caregiving crew, we're going to talk about some strategies there. But if you're in C, you're actually in you're in actually a bit of a fortunate position because you're not quite there, but you want to start making changes now before you hit martyr syndrome, before somebody in your crew hits martyr syndrome. Remember, this isn't just, oh, they're doing too much, they're being too selfless. This actually can have serious consequences, physical, cognitive, psychological, tons and tons of data to support that you martyr yourself. You martyr yourself. And you might not live long enough to see your loved one through the end of his or her life. So if you hit C, please think about what can you change before things get worse. Now, all of us have to get into a Zen place and say, I am the only person who can change. If I'm in martyr syndrome or if I'm on the verge of martyr syndrome, I'm the only one that can change it. But if it's one of your caregiving crewmates, we're going to talk about that too. You can try to influence, you can try to speak to them. You can't necessarily fix it for them. And a lot of us struggle with that. Oh, Nancy, I love this. Nancy says, it really helps to have an honest friend to be accountable to. They see what's going on sometimes. People who really care about us and who really are honest, like, hey, you're doing too much, you're being taken advantage of, you look like crap. Listen, no one likes to hear that they look like crap, or hey, you look like you haven't been sleeping. That never is easy to hear. But when someone who truly loves us, a true honest friend like Nancy says that to you, then it can really motivate us to take action and to do things a little bit differently. So I really appreciate you saying that. That's a great strategy, Nancy. Okay, so have you gone overboard? Do you need to course correct? If you are in martyr syndrome, all throughout cruising through caregiving, it's all about, here's some missteps we make when we're caregiving. Here's how to pull back and course correct and do something differently. So if you're in martyr syndrome, this is what I want to recommend to you. Acknowledge it to your crew. Acknowledge it to, if it's you and your spouse taking care of a parent, if it's you and your siblings taking care of a grandparent, whoever you're collaborating with, it's important for you to acknowledge it and maybe share the exercise that if you go to cruisingthroughcaregiving.com, you can download all of the worksheets and you can share them. Commit to one thing to immediately pull yourself out. So for some people, it might be, I'm going to make an appointment. I haven't had a physical in 4 years. I'm going to make an appointment for a physical. So it might be a P thing. For some of you, it might be $. Maybe you took off work for a while or went part-time to take care of your loved one. And you say, you know, I'm concerned about my future if I don't get back to work. So I'm going to start applying for jobs. And other people in the family friend network are going to have to participate more, or we're going to have to look at maybe a community like Ingleside for our loved one to go to. We're going to have to look at resources. Maybe you are going to accept an invitation to do something social. And for the F part of getting out of martyr syndrome, or, and I want you all to remember this, and this is very important. A lot of times we have turned down so many social invitations that people stop asking. He'll never go. She'll never go. We've asked her 5 times to go to dinner. She's always like, oh, I'm too busy with what's going on in my caregiving situation. Friends and family sometimes feel like, okay, I don't want to bother them anymore. So maybe call up people that you miss. What are you all doing? Can we have coffee? Or can we just talk on the phone? Can I vent to you for 20 minutes? Do something to connect with somebody that you care about. Commit to one thing to pull yourself out. Now, I'm not suggesting that one thing will pull you totally out, but it's going to get you moving in the right direction. What's one thing you can commit to this week that you're going to do differently? Because you can't keep doing things. You can't keep caregiving business as usual if you want to get out of martyr syndrome. Connect. So you're already connected in one way or another with Ingleside, which is fantastic. They've invited you to this program. It's great. Visit, take a look at what they have to offer. Maybe it's a good fit for you and your situation, but your local area agency on aging, which you can find if you don't know where it is, n4a.org. Or if you need a care manager, aginglifecare.org. Do you need an elder law attorney? Do you need help from the Alzheimer's Association, alz.org? So there's a lot of different options. Maybe just connect with one organization who may be able to point you in the right direction of home care, of senior living, like Ingleside, of maybe you're going to look at adult day. Give yourself permission to be imperfect. You are never going to be perfect. You are never going to be a perfect caregiver, ever, ever, ever. There are lots of ways to be a good caregiver. Lots of different ways, but there's no way to be a perfect one. And I think that's what a lot of people in martyr syndrome tend to be going toward. They're striving for perfection, and there's no such thing. So if somebody that you care about is in martyr syndrome, you're worried about your brother, you're worried about your spouse, you're worried about somebody, your niece, somebody that's helping, and they're just giving too much. And you're worried that their physical health is going to suffer, their mental health, their cognitive health. And I see this all the time, and I'm sure the team at Ingleside sees this. We see people in martyr syndrome that pass away before their loved one, or they become hospitalized, or they truly, truly can't do anymore because they've gotten sick, and there really isn't anybody. They're in a crisis now. They got to find placement for their loved one because there's really no one else to help. But if someone else is in martyr syndrome, one question that can often jolt folks into reality is, what happens if you're in the hospital for a week? God forbid you're in a car accident. What happens if it's just 1 week? If you're doing all these different tasks, if you're responsible for so much that you don't have a life yourself, well, what happens if you're in the hospital for a week? Offer the help that they are most likely to accept, the most likely to accept help. So let me give you an example. Maybe, hey, we're taking care of our grandparent. There's a whole bunch of cousins and siblings helping. You know what? Grandma's friend wants to know what he or she can do to help. Get grandma's friend to talk to the person in martyr syndrome. Hey, can I drop a meal off once a week? Now, they might not accept, if they are in martyr syndrome and they're doing everything for the grandparent, they might say, well, I don't want anybody else taking her to the doctor. That's reasonable. We get that. But can they bring over a meal? What if the person's in martyr syndrome, try small things. What are you willing to accept help? Point out specific observations. So if you're seeing somebody else in martyr syndrome, I noticed that you haven't been to church, and I know how much your faith means to you. I noticed you haven't been in 3 months. What's going on? Have you felt the impact of not going to church? How's that made you feel? So what can you point out that might get a reaction, or just specifics though? You want to give something specific. Being persistent, bringing in an authority figure. And when I say an authority figure, for the old generation, the traditionalists, it seems like we get a lot of mileage working with the doctor. A lot of the old really do revere the doctor still. They will do what the doctor says. Not everybody, but a lot of people in the oldest generation are like that. But that doesn't work for everybody, and it certainly doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for as many people in the boomer, in the Gen X, in the millennial, etc. But is there a family friend that everyone respects? Is there a family attorney? Is there a spiritual leader that your family or that individual respects that might be able to break through, whereas other people are not able to get that message through? So these are the ones that are most important. Just take a look if it's somebody else. And I know there were a lot of you who wrote in early in this program that you think it's somebody else. It's not so much you. The one important thing we need to talk about that is uncomfortable for a lot of people is, what if there's truly neglect? What if you're really worried the person is being abused or neglected, that older adult, and a lot of abuse and neglect is not intentional? That maybe it's a son that doesn't realize he isn't able to keep up with feeding his mother enough nutritious food, or getting her to the bathroom, or whatever it may be. The son has the best intentions, or the spouse is pulling too hard when they are trying to get them to go into the shower. If you see any abuse or neglect, even if it's unintentional, call Adult Protective Services. And if you go to napsa-now.org, and Kristen, if you could put that in the chat section, that would be great. If you go to napsa-now.org, you can find your local Adult Protective Services. And I know a lot of people tend to think of this as punitive, but really most of the time what it is that person from Adult Protective Services will come out and try to offer support and try to offer help and try to offer resources. And it sometimes will involve the police if there's a crime going on. But in a lot of other cases, it's just about trying to offer help and trying to offer support. You do not have to give your name when you call one of the local Adult Protective Services. But I think that that's important. It's not just that somebody's doing too much, being too selfless. If they're genuinely abusing or neglecting, that needs to be addressed too. So I want to thank everybody so much for joining us this afternoon. We do have a few moments left. While I wrap up, feel free to write in any last comments at all, anything specific to your situation that you'd like to ask. I'd be more than happy to answer. But I want everybody to walk away from this afternoon and just remind yourself, if you're not happy with what your score was today, or if you're let's just talk about you for a minute. If you're not happy with what your score is today, you're the only one that can change it. You're the only one that can say, I need to try something different. I need a different approach. I need to take back some of my social life. I need to take back some of the healthy habits so I have a better physical health. You're the only one that can do it. And if it is somebody else, know that you can try, you can work with them, but they're a grown-up and they have to do it for themselves. And last but not least, again, I just want to mention, please, if you see any sort of abuse or neglect, even from somebody that you don't believe is doing it intentionally, please be really mindful and really careful to go ahead and call and make that report. You don't have to give your name if you see something that really concerns you genuinely. Thank you all so very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and please go to Cruising Through Caregiving for the worksheet, this Martyr Syndrome worksheet, as well as other worksheets that you can share with your caregiving crew. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you so much, Kristen, for joining us, and again to Ingleside for sponsoring today's program. We're glad to see you here today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.